Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. How would you describe an invasion? Most of you would say that an invasion is a swift military operation, a decisive blow that often ends in a violent takeover. But it doesn't have to be like this always. An invasion could also be a long, drawn-out campaign, one that slowly weakens the target before an actual military campaign begins. Is that how China wants to take over Taiwan? For days now, we've been watching China's moves and telling you about them. Many have asked us this question: will China seize the opportunity? Will it launch an invasion into Taiwan right now? Well, we can tell you today that Beijing has indeed launched a campaign. It is trying to hurt Taiwan on all fronts. The PLA has a new commander. He will lead efforts to intensify China's activities in the Taiwan Straits. Taiwanese institutions are facing relentless cyber attacks, and the people of Taiwan are being bombarded with misinformation. The whole idea is to weaken Taiwan from within. Tonight we'll tell you about China's strategy for Taiwan. Fighter jets, anti-aircraft systems and military drills. Taiwan is responding to China's aggression, showcasing its military might. For days, the world has been worried about a Chinese offensive, and now there's reason to believe that the Chinese campaign to take Taiwan has begun. Does it mean war, an invasion, or a heightened conflict? On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you about China's strategy to weaken Taiwan. We'll begin with the latest from Taipei. The last 24 hours have been significant. Taiwan is signaling intent to take on China. Remember, China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province. It wants to take control over Taiwan, and it doesn't rule out the use of force to do that. So Taipei too is responding with its military. Last night, the global press in Taiwan witnessed a demonstration. Journalists were taken to the Hualien base. This is a key Air Force base on Taiwan's east coast. The government in Taipei organized this entire thing. What was the purpose of this? It was meant to showcase Taiwan's most advanced fighter jet. This is an F-16. It was part of military drills last evening. What kind of drills? Combat readiness. A Taiwanese crew showed how they'll hit back if China launches a military campaign from the skies. 6 F-16 fighters took off in front of these journalists. 2 of these planes were armed with missiles. They conducted night reconnaissance and training missions in the air. Last night, Taiwan sent a message to China. It demonstrated that it is prepared to fight Chinese planes in the skies.
The tension between the Taiwan Strait is getting higher, and it's obvious in knowing that. But that's still what we're training for, and it's what we're preparing for. So they come and we rise, and so our scramble jet will never stop and we will stop their offender and outside our defense outside our ADIZ.
So if the Chinese planes do come, Taiwan is ready to block them. That's what they're trying to show the world. And they can scramble jets in a matter of minutes from this base. The Hualien, a fighter jet, can take off in just 6 minutes. What about preparedness on land? Taiwan has anti-aircraft weaponry on standby. Today it showcased these guns. It said these weapons are ready 24 hours a day in case they need to shoot down a Chinese plane.
We were not nervous at all that time, as a regular training is prepared for all-day 24-hour missile operations. When the Chinese military acted, we were already well prepared. Our soldiers followed the standard operating procedure, which is our troop training program as per normal. So actually we were not nervous at all. We were just excited to finish our mission.
Now this is basically a show of strength. Why does Taiwan need it? To counter the threats from China. Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan has exacerbated the Taiwan-China conflict. It has militarized the Taiwan Straits. It gave China an opening, and Beijing took it to launch an operation to coerce Taiwan into surrendering its independence. The Chinese plan has two components: military and psychological warfare. Let's talk about the military component first. It began as soon as Nancy Pelosi landed in Taiwan. She is the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, and she is now the highest-ranking American politician to visit Taiwan in 25 years. China launched wide-ranging drills to protest her visit, and it hasn't stopped since. Today, the PLA returned to the Taiwan Straits. Taipei detected 6 Navy vessels and 51 Chinese aircraft close to the island. The provocations, in fact, have become a regular affair. Every day, China's military assets come close to Taiwan. They register their presence, and then they leave. Again, what purpose does it serve? China is showing how quickly its military can reach Taiwan. And so it is reminding Taipei how easily it can be attacked. There's every indication that China will continue these drills.
The series of military exercises conducted by the Chinese military in the waters near the Taiwan island are necessary and legitimate measures to counter the major provocative moves of the US and the separatist forces of Taiwan independence, and to resolutely safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The PLA has appointed a new commander for the Taiwan Straits. His name is Wong Zhongkai. He was the chief of the Coast Guard before this appointment, and he's been called the perfect choice for this Taiwan operation. This man is said to be a specialist in incursions. Wong oversaw China's repeated incursions around the Senkaku Islands, the ones near Japan. The Senkaku Islands are a group of uninhabited islands. They're part of the East China Sea. Both Japan and China stake a claim to the Senkakus. They even have different names for them. China calls them the Diaoyu Islands. Japan calls them the Senkakus, and China uses the same tricks there. Under Wong, Chinese ships repeatedly sailed into Japanese waters. And now under Wong, they'll do the same with Taiwan. In fact, he's already started working on the new assignment. He's believed to have played a role in the recent drills around Taiwan. So that's one part of China's plan, the military part. Part two is psychological warfare, and this is something that we don't often focus on. We don't often talk about, but it's an important component of war. It is something that China has mastered. It uses misinformation tactics and spreads fake news. The idea is to spread fear, to make the citizens of Taiwan feel the heat. And I have examples. Look at this picture. It went viral when China started drills near Taiwan. It shows how the Chinese Navy entered Taiwan's territorial waters. This is a Chinese soldier with binoculars. He's looking at a destroyer. Behind the ship is Taiwan's eastern coast. Now, this photograph looks real, but it's not. A Chinese destroyer entering Taiwan's territorial waters would be a grave provocation. It did not happen. Not yet. This is a doctored image. It is believed to be of Chinese origin, and this is just one instance. Taiwan is being bombarded with such misinformation. Like I said, it's meant to spread fear, to make people believe that Taiwan cannot defend itself. Reports say China is also backing cyber attacks on Taiwan. When Nancy Pelosi was in Taipei, the website of Taiwan's president came under attack. And just like China's military drills, These cyber attacks have not stopped. Recently, the National Taiwan University was hacked. The hackers plastered this image all over the website. What does it say? It says, there is only one China in the world. It's a reference to the one China policy and to Beijing's campaign to take control of Taiwan. So we have military drills, we have verbal threats, and we have psychological warfare. The message from China is quite clear. Their mission to take Taiwan is on. So China is clearly fueling a war. The question is, can they afford to? And I don't mean this metaphorically, I mean it literally. You see, wars are not just fought for oil, they're also fought with oil. You need fuel for your jets. You need aircraft carriers. And you need fuel for them, for your tanks. And that could be a problem for China. First, some basic facts. China is the second largest oil consumer in the world. The US is the first. But unlike the US, China is not energy independent. They make up 13% of global consumption, but only 1.5% of the total reserves. The result is this: China imports a lot. Almost 72% of their oil is bought from abroad. How much is that? More than 11.8 million barrels per day. And remember, this is during peacetime. China last fought a war in 1979 against Vietnam. If another war breaks out, the oil demand will increase. China's 1.4 billion people will need oil, their warships will need oil, their factories will need oil. The question is, where will this oil come from? These are China's top sources of crude. Saudi Arabia 17%, Russia 15%, Iraq 10%, Oman almost 9%, Angola 7% and Kuwait 6%. These are the top 6 sellers. Now, if you look at West Asia, it makes up almost 50.4% of China's imports. Another 6% comes from the US and its Western allies. And now for the most important question. How does this oil reach China? The Russian oil is mostly transported through a pipeline in Siberia, but what about the rest? Almost 60% of China's oil imports are waterborne. They're shipped via sea. And that means going through 3 important choke points. Let me show you on the map. One is the Strait of Hormuz. It is located between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Almost 21 million barrels pass through this strait every day. The second choke point is this one, the Strait of Malacca. It separates Malaysia and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. If you want to go from West Asia to China, this is the shortest route. Almost 80% of China's seaborne oil passes through here. Cut that off and Beijing will struggle. In fact, China's leaders have accepted this strategic challenge. In 2003, former President Hu Jintao called it the Malacca Dilemma. And now the final choke point, the Singapore Strait. It is just 19 kilometers long and it links the Strait of Malacca to the South China Sea. Without that, ships have to take the long way around. Now, what is common about these 3 waterways? For starters, China does not control any of them. But guess who does? The United States Navy. The US 5th Fleet is stationed in this region. It covers almost 2.5 million square miles of water. That includes the Arabian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Oman, and parts of the Indian Ocean. They have also stationed soldiers in this region. Around 10 military bases in Saudi Arabia, another 10 in Kuwait. Compare that to China. They have 0 military bases in West Asia. The closest one they have is the PLA outpost in Djibouti. Same in the South China Sea. Beijing has territorial disputes with nearly all of Southeast Asia. At the same time, the US keeps patrolling these waters. They're still the dominant Pacific power. So Washington could leverage these choke points. If you cut them off, you cut off China's oil supply. No fuel for jets, no fuel for armored vehicles, and no fuel for warships. It could effectively ground China's war machine. And such blockades have been done before. I can give you at least 2 examples. In World War I, Britain blockaded Germany and Austria-Hungary. The idea was to starve them into submission. In World War II, it was Germany's chance. German U-boats were used to blockade the Atlantic. US war supplies to Britain were gradually choked. So the strategy itself is not new. It has been employed before and with success. Now, from the looks of it, China is the perfect candidate. Is there any way to beat this blockade then? One option is to break through it. Use the PLA Navy to engage with the US military. But that could be a risky operation. After all, Chinese warships are still untested. They're still technologically behind their US peers. So a shooting contest is not in China's interest. The second option is to sidestep the sea. Enter the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. China has been trying to build land links from West Asia to China. The mission was going well until the virus from Wuhan hit it. And since then, it has lost momentum. Where does that leave the Chinese? They could use up their strategic oil reserves. They could also import more from Russia, but how long will that last? Can you really replace 60% of your oil imports overnight? Chances are you can't. Seamless supply lines are key to every war. If it's oil, it's even more crucial. Does that mean it's game over for China? Well, don't forget one thing. This is war we're talking about. There is no saying how things will play out. A lot of factors will decide whether China loses its oil supply. Chief among them is American resolve. How far is the US prepared to go? How much is Joe Biden willing to stake? Because remember, a blockade won't just affect China, it could also affect US allies in the region, countries like Japan and South Korea. If Joe Biden sees Taiwan as another Ukraine, do not expect very much. At best, he'll send weapons, maybe a few warship patrols, but that's it. But if he sees Taiwan as a key strategic interest, the blockade may happen. China's Malacca dilemma could become the Malacca nightmare. And talking about nightmares, Ukraine is staring at one. Russia is planning a dangerous escalation. It wants to strike Ukraine hard and to punish it for the recent humiliation in Crimea. The threat is on two fronts. Ukraine's northern border with Belarus and at Europe's largest nuclear plant in Zaporizhia. The war in Ukraine, as we've been telling you, is taking a dangerous turn. In the next few minutes, we'll tell you how. First, the threat from Belarus. Russia could launch a fresh attack from there. A build-up is underway. Reports say Russia is stockpiling missiles in the north. Where exactly? The Zyabrovka airfield. Why is this worrying? Because this airfield is barely 24 kilometers away from the Ukraine border. Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs says Russia is stockpiling surface-to-air missile systems in Belarus. What happens if Russia decides to use them? Ukraine will be under attack from three sides. Let's pull up the map again. The war in Ukraine is being fought on two flanks right now, the east and the south. Ukrainian and Russian fighters are locked in a fierce battle in these two regions, the east and the south. What happens if Russia begins firing missiles from the north? Ukraine's forces are already stretched. With another front open, they'll struggle to defend themselves. And there is a high risk of escalation. It could happen as soon as next week. Why next week? Because Ukraine's Independence Day is coming. It falls on the 24th of August. It was on this day, 24th of August, that Ukraine split from the erstwhile Soviet Union. Well, this time no celebrations are planned, but it will still be a state holiday, and that's when Russia is believed to be planning to strike. Reports say Belarus could be the launch pad for this offensive. Ukraine's defense forces have issued a statement. In fact, I have a copy with me. This is a statement from the spokesperson of Ukraine's Air Force Command, and here is what he said. Let me remind you that it was its territory that Russia used from the first days of the full-scale invasion and launched strikes from there with various weapons. Airplanes, Iskander, Tochkayu missiles. Therefore, we must definitely be prepared for possible missile strikes. And why just missile strikes? Ukraine is worried about fighters from Belarus joining the war. There is a build-up near Ukraine's border in the north. An independent watchdog has spotted fighters in two districts, the Kobrin and the Biaroza districts. And this comes as no surprise. Belarusian forces have been conducting combat readiness drills. Their leader, President Alexander Lukashenko, was building up a military unit. The focus of this unit was the Ukraine border. Belarus is a strong ally of Russia, remember. It has allowed Moscow to launch attacks into Ukraine before, and it could happen again. More worrying, though, are Russia's activities in the south. Russian forces control a nuclear plant there in Zaporizhia. It is caught in a dangerous crossfire between Russian and Ukrainian troops. The world is raising an alarm. The threat of a nuclear disaster looms. We've been telling you about this for a while. Today, Russia issued a statement. It said the constant shelling has damaged the plant. Its backup support systems have been affected. Now, it's not clear how serious this damage is. The United Nations has been pushing for access. It wants inspectors from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, to travel to Ukraine and make an assessment. The IAEA is the global nuclear watchdog. The United Nations also wants this area to be demilitarized, but Russia has rejected the idea.
Kiev has repeatedly demonstrated its ability to stage provocations and its lack of ability to control nationalist formations. This is the same reason why the proposals to demilitarize the zone around Zaporizhia nuclear plant are unacceptable. The implementation of these proposals will make the station even more vulnerable.
There is a proposal to hand the plant back to Ukraine, but Moscow is unlikely to agree. It has already suffered embarrassment in Crimea. 2 Russian bases there were severely damaged in a series of explosions. Russia will make no concessions after this setback. It is blaming saboteurs and pro-Ukrainian fighters for the attacks. Kiev refuses to take responsibility. And now reports say that the US too is backing this offensive. The US has been boosting Ukraine's firepower. The latest addition is radar-busting missiles. And what is that? These are missiles that can detect and destroy enemy radars, air defense systems, and communications networks. Basically, anything with a radio signal can be destroyed. These radar-busting missiles are helping Ukraine make territorial gains. But Russia now plans to hit back, and with Ukraine's Independence Day approaching, there is threat of a serious escalation. As the war enters a new phase, an old question has also resurfaced. Why is India still buying Russian oil? Well, we thought this controversy was debated and settled. Turns out it's not. On Wednesday, Ukraine's foreign minister raised it again, and this time he used some tough words. Listen to what he said. I am quoting. This is Ukraine's foreign minister. He says every barrel of Russian crude oil delivered to India has a good portion of Ukrainian blood in it. That was Dmytro Kuleba. He is the foreign minister of Ukraine. Now, we understand his frustration. His country has been constantly under attack for almost 6 months now. Hundreds of people have been killed, thousands have been injured, and millions displaced. It is indeed a traumatic and difficult period. Having said that, Kuleba is Ukraine's top diplomat. His job is to recruit more allies and partners, not to burn existing bridges. India's policy is not about bankrolling Russia's war. It's about getting the best deal for its people. And right now, that means buying Russian oil. Immediately after the invasion, crude prices shot up. They touched almost $120 per barrel. Here in India, that means inflation and hardships. So what did India do? It bought discounted oil from Russia. You see, Moscow is selling its oil at a cheaper rate, almost $30 per barrel lesser. And for countries like India, that's too good to ignore. Earlier this week, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar defended that policy. He said it's his moral duty to get the best deal for India. Listen to this.
So it is a situation today where every country will try naturally to get the best deal possible for its citizens, will try to cushion the impact of this high energy prices. And that is exactly what we are doing. Now, we are not doing it in a defensive way. I mean, we have been very open and very honest about our interest. You know, I have a country which has a per capita income of $2,000. These are not people who can afford higher energy prices. It is my obligation, my moral duty to actually ensure that I get them the best deal that I can from the world.
Sound like a deja vu? I won't blame you. In this particular instance, Jaishankar was speaking in Thailand, but everywhere he goes, he gets the same question. In the US, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, every Western journalist asks him the very same question. Why is India buying Russian oil? If you look at it on paper, yes, it looks bad. India was buying just 33,000 barrels of oil per day from Russia last year. Now almost 820,000 barrels per day. So yes, the numbers do look bad. But what about the politics behind these numbers? India's neutral position is based on 2 factors. One is financial. Most Western countries are posting record inflation. 40-year high in the US, 39-year high in Canada, 40-year high in Britain. But India's inflation is slowly cooling off. Wholesale prices were up 16% in May, but they slowed down to 13.9% by July. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India says inflation may have peaked in the month of April. And if so, oil discounts could be one of the reasons why. Discounted Russian oil cushioned the impact on India. The second reason is political. India's relationship with Russia is older than this conflict. It dates back to the Soviet times. There is synergy in military equipment, space research, defense manufacturing. We are talking about decades of cooperation that cannot be wiped out overnight. Do Western countries understand this position? Listen into what the US State Department spokesperson said on Wednesday.
But we also recognize, as I was saying just a moment ago, that this is not flipping a light switch. This is something that, especially for countries that have historical relationships with Russia, relationships that, as is the case with India, extend back decades, it is going to be a long-term proposition to reorient foreign policy away from Russia.
He had us in the first part. Yes, this is not like flipping a switch. You cannot change your strategic partners in one night. But did you hear the second part of that statement? Ned Price says it will take time to reorient India's policy. Has he discussed that with India? Has India consented to reorient its policy, or is the US making that decision for India? And this is precisely the problem with Washington, D.C. You're either with us or against us. But what if India wants to be neither? As far as New Delhi is concerned, Russia is not a threat. It is, in fact, a partner. So why should India abandon its partner over a war it did not trigger and a war it cannot stop? Also, why is there no such outrage against Europe? They've still not sanctioned Russian gas, by the way. They're still paying billions to Russian state companies. Is that gas not tainted with blood? The fact is, strategic foreign policy choices are hard to make, and that's what this is for India, a strategic foreign policy choice. World powers may try to dictate it, neighbors may try to influence it, but ultimately the choice must be made by the people themselves. Ukraine, of all countries, should know this. They made a strategic choice to join the NATO. Russia opposed it. China discouraged it. But in the end, it was a choice made by the people of Ukraine. 6 months later, they're still fighting for the right to make that choice. Why should India be any different? And now to the US, where embassies are struggling with a massive backlog, of visa applications. The impact is overbearing. Consider the case of India. If you're from India and you want to visit the United States of America, you'll have to wait until 2024 to get a visa appointment. And you heard that right, we're in 2022, August. You will have to wait till 2024. This is for travel visa. If you're an Indian student and are looking to relocate to the US, you'll have to wait 471 days for a visa appointment in New Delhi. And why just the US? Visa appointments for most Western countries are taking weeks, if not months. What explains this delay? Here's a report.
Are you planning a trip to the United States? Are you looking to apply for a visa? Then be ready to get disappointed. You may end up crossing calendars. Here's why. The average waiting time for a visitor visa to the US is now 500 days. That is almost 1.5 years. Meaning, if you apply for a visa this month, you may not get an appointment until March 2024. If you're booking an appointment from the US Embassy in New Delhi, you may have to wait 582 days for a visitor visa. In Hyderabad, the waiting time for a visitor visa is 518 days. In Mumbai, you'll have to wait 517 days. In Kolkata, 587 days. In Chennai, 513 days. Same story with student visas. In New Delhi, you'll have to wait 471 days for a student visa. In Hyderabad, 479 days. Where does this leave students? In the grip of uncertainty, many students are confused if they should wait for their slot or consider alternative countries to pursue their education. Even then, the prospects are not too bright. Visa appointments to any of the so-called first world countries will take you weeks, if not months. A visitor visa to the UK will take 7 weeks to process. Switzerland has slots open only in September end, and the earliest date available for France is 28th September, that too only in Mumbai. There are no slots available for a visitor visa to Italy. What's taking their embassies so long? Massive backlogs due to the Wuhan virus. Most of these embassies stopped working during lockdowns. This has led to a high volume of pending applications, a limited availability of appointments, and stretched visa processing timelines. Some countries have also tightened rules for granting visas. The process now involves more checks, like verification of vaccination certificates. So, what is the solution? There is none, besides waiting for the backlog to clear, say experts. But in the age of technology, where everything is digitized, especially in the developing world, visa backlogs sound appalling. India's Ministry of External Affairs is pursuing the matter. It is pushing Western nations to clear the jam, reminding them of the damage the delays are causing to people-to-people relations. Also, how Indian missions abroad work overtime if needed to issue visas. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let me now show you a photo. What do you think this looks like? This is not Mars. It is the United States of America, a drought-hit United States of America. This is Lake Mead, America's largest reservoir. Its water levels have fallen to 28%. It is 175 feet lower than it used to be in the year 2000. What do you think is happening here? The US is battling extreme heat and low rainfall, and the result looks like this. Almost all of the American states are experiencing drought conditions. In some, it's severe, in some, exceptional, like in the case of Texas. Here, farmers have had to sell their cows for slaughter well ahead of schedule. Why? Because they could not afford to keep the cattle. Water sources have dried up, and there is no grass to feed the cows. Farmers in Lone Star have downed their herd size by 50%. 43% in Mexico, 41% in Oregon. 37% of American farmers have killed their existing crops. They're convinced that crops won't mature under such dry conditions. How dry are we talking about? The U.S. experienced the third hottest July on record. In parts of Texas, the average temperature was around 38 degrees. For the U.S., this is beyond normal. As we speak, 60% of West, South, and Central Plains have been hit by severe or exceptional drought. In Arizona and Nevada, the water level in the Colorado River is nearing its lowest point ever. The river supplies water to some 40 million people, both in the US and in Mexico. It also supports agricultural production in the area, feeds Lake Mead and Lake Powell. But this river is in the throes of a drought. The shoreline is receding and skeletons are emerging. 5 sets of human skeletons have emerged from Lake Mead since the month of May. A World War II boat has also emerged. So have bathtub rings. Authorities say if water levels continue to fall, the Colorado will not be able to generate electricity. So Arizona and Nevada have been told to limit the amount of water they pump from the river. In California, residents have been asked to cut power use. Supplies too have reached to its breaking point. In Las Vegas and some other cities, authorities have banned lawns, meaning you cannot have grass patches in housing societies, commercial sites, or sidewalks. That's because the grass consumes too much water. So turfs are now being dug up. Some are being replaced by desert plants. Some are just being covered with gravel. This is the state of the United States of America. 50% of California's farmers have had to remove their crops. This is a state that has high fruit and nut tree crops, California. Why is all of this happening? We all know the answer to the question. It's climate change. We've spoken about this and its causes over and over again. So let's focus instead on what this extreme weather means for those watching us from the US. One, it means a summer of extremes. Parts of California, for example, recorded temperatures up to 43 degrees Celsius on the 17th of August. Extreme heat also risks wildfires, many of which are already blazing in the US. And temperature is not the only thing to worry about. There's also high food prices since orchards have been destroyed. Crops have been raised. There's bound to be an imbalance in demand and supply. Reports say fruits, nuts and vegetables in the US mostly come from states hit by droughts. What about meat? Currently, the market is flooded with cattle. Ranchers are selling off their herd. Calves that would usually sell for up to $800 are reportedly now being sold for $70. But once the market consumes these excess animals, the ranchers are left with a smaller breeding herd and prices are bound to go up. What about the rest of the world, even if you're not in the US? And your budget will feel the burn of this extreme weather. Take almonds, for example. I'm assuming a lot of you consume them. Well, did you know California grows 80% of the world's almonds? The drought has hit almond production, and our markets worldwide will feel the shortage. Same with wheat, corn, soybean, and other American exports. You know what they say? You reap what you sow. For decades now, we have sown the seeds of climate change, and now the US barely has crops to reap. They say work hard and party hard. Prioritize professional growth, but also enjoy your personal life. And we've all got this advice at least once in our life, sometimes more. For many, it's even a lifestyle. But what about public representatives, the people who lead us, people in public life? Are they allowed to have a private life? This is a question that Finland is debating, courtesy their Prime Minister, 36-year-old Sanna Marin. A viral video shows her partying with her friends, dancing like there's no tomorrow. Many people her age would consider it normal. But because she's a world leader, she seems to have landed herself in the middle of this debate. Critics say she's brought disgrace to the Prime Minister's institution. Some are calling for her resignation. Our next report has more.
She's the world's youngest Prime Minister, a strong-minded egalitarian known for her grace and poise. When she's at work, she's breaking stereotypes and drafting policies. When she's not, she likes to let her hair down and party with her girls. Meet Sanna Marin, the 36-year-old Prime Minister of Finland. Right now, she's in the eye of a storm. It all started with this video. What you just saw was Sanna Marin partying with Finnish celebrities like it's 2019. Most 30-something successful people might consider this a normal weekend. But because Sanna Marin is a Prime Minister, she is facing calls to resign. The backlash is crazy. Borderline sexist. Some are making a big deal of her clothes. Some are upset at her moves. Some are calling it an insult to the Prime Minister's institution. A Finnish MP even wants Marin to undergo a drug test. The support is equally overwhelming. Marin's supporters don't see anything scandalous. They say it's okay to blow off steam sometimes, to maintain a healthy work-life balance. What does Marin herself have to say about this? She says she knew she was being filmed, but is upset that the video was leaked. In a detailed statement, she added, "I danced, sang, and partied, perfectly legal things. And I've never been in a situation where I've seen or known of others using drugs." The thing is, Marin is known for making no secret of partying. She's been photographed at music festivals. Even found clubbing in Helsinki at 4 a.m. Only that she went out despite COVID exposure. She is under more scrutiny as the leader of a country located right next to Russia, which is edging closer to a NATO membership. with prices of food and fuel soaring each day. But this episode also reignites an old debate. Can public representatives not have private lives? Do voters relate more to leaders like themselves? When the social media hangover of this video eases, perhaps the world will see it for what it is. A woman partying with her friends is doing her day job as the Prime Minister. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Rival countries are always guarded about their militaries. How they're trained, how they operate, what sort of equipment they use, all of this is kept under wraps. The idea is to retain the element of surprise, which is why our next story may come as a surprise. India and China could soon participate in a joint military drill in Russia. Let that sink in. Indian and Chinese soldiers, part of the same exercise. Time for some context. The drill in question is called Vostok. It is one of the 4 annual strategic exercises hosted by Russia. The last edition was in 2018. Now the word Vostok means east, so these drills will likely be held in Russia's far eastern provinces. The Russian announcement mentioned very few details. The dates would be August 30th to September 5th. 13 training grounds would be used and multiple foreign armies would be joining. Which ones, Russia did not specify. But now we have a statement from the Chinese Defense Ministry. The PLA will be participating in the drills, they say. And according to China, so will India. Beijing claims soldiers from India, Belarus, Mongolia and Tajikistan will attend these drills. What is the Indian government saying? Well, so far nothing. The Defense Ministry is yet to deny or confirm China's claim. But if India does participate, what would it mean politically? Why is this joint drill significant? For starters, Russia is at war. Their soldiers have attacked a sovereign neighbor. They're capturing Ukrainian land, so holding joint drills with them may not be the right move. And secondly, China will be there too. Since the Galwan clashes in 2020, India-China ties have hit rock bottom. There have been 16 rounds of military talks, yet both sides have not disengaged from Ladakh. It is still a simmering flashpoint. And in that context, how can India and China train together? How can their soldiers be part of the same drills? Well, according to China, it's not a problem. They have separated the drills from both the issues. Listen to the Chinese statement. This is what it says. The aim is to deepen practical and friendly cooperation with the armies of participating countries. They are in no way related to the current international and regional situation. Are they talking about Ukraine or about Ladakh, or perhaps both? The question is, should India also see it that way? Should India participate? Well, last year India did. Russia hosted the Zapad military drills in 2021. 17 countries, including India, China and Pakistan, participated. So there is precedent for joining the drills. Plus, things like these are not decided over dinner. Annual military drills are planned and scheduled years in advance. Maybe this one was planned before the Ukraine invasion. So experts believe that India will not pull out. It will send soldiers to Vostok 2022. What happens after that is up to Russia. As the host, Moscow has a lot of power over how the drills are conducted. They can decide where each contingent trains, who they train against, and what exercises they do. For example, Russia could keep the Indian and Chinese soldiers in separate training grounds. No joint drills, no squaring off, just 2 separate exercises. Having said that, India would still look like the odd one out, and I'll tell you why. The last edition of Vostok was all about Russia and China. They deployed 300,000 soldiers, 1,000 aircraft, 80 ships, 36,000 tanks. It was all about showing solidarity against the Western powers, against the US push into the Indo-Pacific. And this one is expected to be more of the same. Russia wants to show that it can spare military resources despite what's happening in Ukraine. China wants to solidify its ties with Russia. Does India really want to be part of this gang? It's a tough pickle for the policymakers in New Delhi. And we'll end tonight's show with a story that sounds downright bizarre if summed up in one line. Japan is asking its youth to drink more alcohol. Like I said, bizarre. Japan says its youth are not drinking enough. But how much alcohol is enough alcohol? The answer to this question varies depending on who you ask. Your parents may tell you even a glass of wine is more than enough. Scientists may manipulate the answer depending on who is funding their study. Ask a bartender and he or she will say there is no such thing called enough alcohol. Because the more you drink, the more you tip. Now, if the world were a bar, Japan would be that bartender. It is asking people to drink more for the sake, or sake, should I say, of economy. Do the Japanese not drink enough? Quite the opposite, in fact. In the 1990s, an average Japanese was drinking 100 litres of alcohol per person per year. 100 litres. An average Scotch bottle is 750 ml. Do the math. 100 litres. By 2020, the Japanese were drinking 75 litres of alcohol a year, almost 100 bottles. That should be enough, shouldn't it? Well, no, says Japan. Any idea why? Because its alcohol revenues are falling. Look at this chart. In 1980, alcohol contributed 5% to the national revenue. Today, that's down to 1.7%. The fall in alcohol revenue is not something Japan's tax agency wants to raise a glass to. So it has launched a nationwide competition. The challenge is to make youngsters drink more and to come up with ideas that can once again popularize drinking, even if it means home drinking. Japan is open to all kinds of ideas, it seems. Contestants can propose new products to popularize drinking, also come up with new designs, even ideas to sell sake on metaverse. Whatever gets the youth drinking, Japan wants it. The challenge is called the Sake Viva, and it bids sayonara to health concerns. The health ministry says it hopes the campaign will remind people to not drink too much. Well, that's impossible, isn't it? You can't tell people to drink more and also ask them to make a hard stop. The Japan of the early 2000s would not have needed such a desperate competition. After-work drinking was still a part and parcel of Japanese culture then. It was called nomikai. Colleagues would hit a bar or pub together, gather around large tables, share drinks, and get to know each other. Skipping these after-work drinks was considered against social and work etiquette. But the times have changed. Today, people with families are prioritizing work-life balance. They're skipping after-work parties to go back home early. There's also been an increase in the awareness about alcohol consumption. And the result is this: younger Japanese are not drinking as much. Work from home has made matters worse. Beer sales alone have fallen 20% in Japan. Today, Japan is not among the world's heavy drinkers. Seychelles tops that list, followed by Uganda, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Germany, Ireland, Latvia, Spain, and Bulgaria. You must know that Japan is not the first country to ask its people to overlook their health for economy. Not too long ago, remember, Belgians were reminded of their national duty to eat fries twice a week. Why? Because the pandemic had blocked exports and 750,000 tons of Belgian potatoes were staring at the risk of rotting. What potatoes are to Belgium, vodka is to Russia, and sake and suntory are to Japan. So the Japanese must drink more, day drink if needed, for the sake of their country. Sorry for the bad puns. We're wrapping the show with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.